In this episode, I'll show you how to create your own GitHub repo that can take place of CodePen and launch by hitting a single period. I'll also show you how to create a custom environment using CodeSpaces with your own node modules so that you can run Tailwind CSS in just-in-time mode. It's Wednesday, September 1st. This is episode 5 of the Toolbox, so let's get tooling. Hey, this is Ravi Jalobos, and I like to share cool front-end and full-stack tools every Wednesday at 10 a.m. Pacific and 1 p.m. Eastern. So follow me and subscribe on all the social media networks for tons more content. If you want to watch any past episodes or learn about any of my courses, make sure you take a look at my blog, which is ravo.org. Now, normally during this time, I show you what I call the Toolbox Shorts. It's kind of a showcase of small tools. But since we're going to be building a playground in Tailwind CSS, I'm going to skip that and go directly to showing you how to do something first, and then I'll get onto the Toolbox Shorts. So essentially, I'm going to start by showing you CodeSwing in Visual Studio Code, or CodeSwing, which is a Visual Studio Code extension that lets you create an interactive playground, and you can use it in the same way that you would use CodePen, but it does have some significant advantages. So we'll take a look at how you install it, set up, and then use it through GitHub CodeSpaces. Now, since it's a Visual Studio Code extension, the easiest way to install it is to go to the extension tabs. So let me show you a little bit of a demo on that. CodeSwing is a Visual Studio Code extension that lets you create an interactive playground similar to CodePen, but with some significant advantages. So we'll take a look at how you can install it, set it up, and use it on GitHub through CodeSpaces. Since it's a Visual Studio Code extension, the easiest way to install it is to find the extension tabs in the activity bar, or go to the View menu and select Extensions. From there, you can click on the search box and type in CodeSwing, then hit the Install button. Now that it's installed, you can start a swing by using the command palette. You can use the View menu or use the keyboard shortcut. I'll type in CodeSwing and look at all the options that are available. Since I know I'm going to be using this later, I'll add a swing into a directory. I'll make a new folder and go ahead and hit the Open button. You'll get an option to select a template to get started with. There's quite a few options here, including HTML, JavaScript, React, and other pre-built templates. I'm going to go with the first option, HTML, CSS, and JavaScript. This is going to open up a swing in your playground. Now notice that there's no folder that's actually open. So let's go ahead and open this folder. You'll notice that there are 4 different files in here: index.html, JavaScript and CSS, as well as an additional CodeSwing.json file. That one stores all the settings for your CodeSwing. There are 3 tabs open as well as a preview. Let's go ahead and hide the open editors. Now let's try adding some HTML. Since I have the Emmet extension on, I can use some shortcuts. One of the first advantages to CodePen is that I have the full power of Visual Studio Code in an environment with all of my extensions and plugins. It's the editor I'm used to working in with my own preferences and color themes. Let's try some CSS. Now this is a live preview that updates constantly. In the background, Webpack is managing all of your files and letting you see changes as you make them. I also get the full power of VS Code's IntelliSense. Let's try some simple JavaScript. See how the text for the welcome is even being updated as I type it. Now, like in CodePen, we didn't have to use scripts or link tags to make the CSS and scripts interactive. Now that we have a solid swing going, we should have more options in the command palette. Let's try changing the layout, but before we do that, let's make sure all these files are saved. Now let's go into the command palette, type in CodeSwing to see the options, and select Change Layout. You can see that there's a lot of different options right here. Let's try the Split Left layout. Now this automatically hides the documents, so you can click right here if you want to see them back. And I have a lot more room to work with now. Now you can also change the layout by using this icon right here and choosing a different option from the list. If you choose the tabbed option, you can see that all of the files will be in separate tabs in the same section of your page. I like the other layout better. Let's try adding a library to make our code playground a little bit better. I'll go to the command palette, type CodeSwing again, and I'll choose Add Library. Now from here I can choose whether to add a script module, just a regular script reference, or a style sheet. I'll choose style sheet, and you can see that there's a long list here of things that I can add. I'm going to type in Bootstrap, and I'll choose it from the list. Now here I can pick the version of Bootstrap that I want to be using. I'll go ahead and choose 5.1. And here I can choose the version of the library that I want to use. I'm going to use the minified version of Bootstrap. You can see that the text already looks a bit different. Let's go ahead and play around with this a little bit. I'll make these a little bit smaller. And I'll place all my content in a container class. Now everything aligns into my breakpoints. Let's go ahead and add some more classes here. Let's go ahead and get rid of some of these other paragraphs. If you're a developer, you're probably already wondering how it's doing all this. Now there's certainly some magic happening in the extension, but basically it's using CDNs to load up the different libraries. CodeSwing already knows how to look for the HTML, CSS, and JavaScript files, and the way it keeps track of the additional libraries we've added is in the special CodeSwing.json file. Let's go ahead and save this and open up our Explorer and take a look at that CodeSwing.json file. You can see that there's a section for our scripts. We're not using anything in here. We would want to add a link to our Bootstrap JavaScript if we were using the full version. Here's the link to the style sheet, and you can see that it's loading it from a CDN. So far, this would be great for maybe demos that you'd be doing in a classroom. But what if you want to share something with the world? Now, that's where GitHub CodeSpaces will come in handy. So let's go ahead and create a new repo for this project. I'm going to go to repo.new. That's a quick shortcut to get a repo going. And I'm going to call this BootSwing. I'll hit create repository down here. And then I'll copy the terminal command to add the origin because it's really a bit long to remember. So let me copy this, switch back over in here. I'll go ahead and open up the terminal and I'll do a git init. Then go ahead and add everything and commit. Let's go ahead and clear this out. All right, there's a couple of other files that I need to add. First, I need to go ahead and add a git ignore file. I'm on a Mac, and they always create these files called dsstore, and I want to make sure that these are not pushed onto GitHub. Also, this is going to work just fine for me because I already have the CodeSwing extension, but if somebody went to GitHub, they wouldn't get the same experience unless they had the same extension. So what I'll do is I'll create a folder here. I'm going to call this dev container. And in there, I'm going to create a file called dev container.json. Now in here, I want to add the extension that I want preloaded when we open up the CodeSpaces environment. Now let's go ahead and add these. Now that we're in here, we can just hit the period. And our project will run with CodeSpaces using our CodeSwing. Now, if you want to share this with somebody, you can just copy this URL and send somebody the link for this CodeSwing. You know, this is going to make a nice starter template that I could use in other projects. So I'm going to go to the Settings tab, and then I'll click on Template Repository right here. Now, if you go back to the repo, you can create a new repository based on this one by hitting this button right here. All right, so that's pretty cool. You can always go to that URL. You can go to my GitHub repo, which is github.com/planetoftheweb, and then just add a slash and then put BootSwing. You can get to this template. You can fork it if you want to and maybe modify it for your own. You can see that it's pretty easy to sort of set up your own type of CodePen environment. And what I really love about it is the fact that you get to sort of use the editor that you're used to using. With VS Code, you can even make sure that you're using all of the same plugins that you're using, and they can be synced up with your local machine. So I really love this way of doing things. I'm probably going to use CodePen less and less, perhaps maybe especially in courses. There's a lot of extensions that you can run on Visual Studio Code that will let you do crazy things. Like, for example, you can do pair programming and all kinds of other stuff. So I can't wait to sort of use the process. Let's take a look at, see if there's any comments. Looks like we are having some streaming problems. Really apologize. I'm gonna see if by next week I can have somebody cable me in some wired internet in here because I am using the Wi-Fi and it could just be my machine having to go through the network. You know, things are slowed down. I actually ordered a new machine. So hopefully by next week, I'll have a new M1 Mac Mini here, as well as a wired connection. And hopefully that'll take care of most of the problems. I'm going to see if there's anything else in here. Any other questions? All right, I don't see anything right now. Appreciate you letting me know if there's any problems. Also, I'm going to have the recording of this later on, and I usually clip out like a couple of things from the shows, so I'm going to make sure that I have a high version or a high resolution version of my demo of BootSwing. You know, it's a separate sort of high resolution download that you'd be able to watch without any streaming problems. So this is just a place for you to ask questions if you want to and interact. I have some more stuff that I want to show you. I really loved using Tailwind, and recently, I think in there's a version 2.0, and I have a course on version 2.0, and then they released version 2.1 and 2.2. In version 2.1, they added this feature called the just-in-time compiler. So essentially what it does is it allows you to create only CSS that you're using in your files. And it works by looking at certain types of files, analyzing the code in them. And if it notices that there is some classes in there, it builds a custom version of Tailwind CSS. So it creates extremely tiny files. It's pretty amazing. And I think it's going to change the way that people program. I feel like Tailwind CSS. It's almost like what Bootstrap could have been. At some point, Bootstrap announced that it was going to be using Post CSS. Tailwind CSS is essentially a Post CSS plugin that just does all this amazing stuff. It certainly has a very interesting approach to things. So, for example, the fact that you have to use so many classes means that if you're using a button, a lot of times it does make it a little bit difficult. So let me show you how to set up. So the demo that I'm going to show you is how you can actually set up CodeSpaces, not the sort of free version of CodeSpaces that you just hit a period with, but how you can set up your own CodeSpaces environment to run with the just-in-time compiler. So this will show you how to actually use CodeSpaces and have it run any NPM scripts. There's a lot of stuff in here. So let's get to that second demo.
I want to create a TailSwing just-in-time project using CodeSpaces. Now I can use this template that I created for my CodeSwing, but it's going to need some additional tooling. And that's because the JIT compiler is going to need to be able to do some compiling. Now, because of that, I'm also going to need to use the regular version of CodeSpaces. So I'm going to set this up by starting with the BootSwing template, and I'll click on this button right here. I'm going to call this TailSwing, and I'm going to create a repository here. Now, instead of hitting the period or changing the URL to a .dev, I'm going to click on code right here, and I'll switch over to the CodeSpaces tab, and I'll click on New CodeSpace. Now this is going to give me a full Visual Studio Code environment, which means that I can run scripts on this. So I'm going to pull up the terminal, and I'm going to need to do some additional installations here. All right, first I'm going to create a package.json file. I can create a default one by saying npm init -y. You'll see that it is now over here in the document. Let's go ahead and hide the open editors. And there it is right there. Now we'll also need to install some additional modules. So let's go ahead and do npm install -d Tailwind CSS JIT plus Tailwind CSS. And I'll also need to install Post CSS. Tailwind is, as a matter of fact, a Post CSS plugin. All right, let's go ahead and clear this out. We're also going to need some configuration files. So that means including a tailwind.config.js and a postcss.config file. So we can do that using npx this time. So npx tailwind css init -p. This is going to generate two files for us with the defaults, this postcss config.js and this tailwind config.js. Now we're going to need a script in the package.json file to start our container with. So let's go ahead and close these out for now. And I'm going to change this test script to be start. And this is going to run the Tailwind command. And it's going to need an input as well as an output file. So for the input, I'm going to create a source folder. And I'm going to create a file in there called src.css. So it's going to take whatever is in the CSS file, see if there's any custom styles for Tailwind CSS in there. And then I'm going to output this into just the style.css file. So that would be this file right here. CodeSwing will automatically read the style.css file as well as the index.html file. And if you have one, the script.js as well. Finally, we're going to need to issue the watch command here. That way, this code space will automatically watch for any changes into any one of our files, mainly this CSS file. If anything has changed there, then it will recompile our CSS for us. So I'm going to save that. Now I need to create this source.css file. So I'm going to make a folder here. This is going to be called source. And in there, I'll create a file called src.css. And in here, I need to type in the basic imports for a Tailwind configuration. So when you start Tailwind, as I mentioned, it is a PostCSS plugin. And PostCSS allows you to import things, right? And so you could do that with Tailwind using the Tailwind command. And then you import a number of things. So I'm going to import the base styles, components, and utilities. So the base is usually like the browser resets. Component is where the custom components would be. And then utilities are things like media queries. The reason I'm making this file is so that I can customize my CSS if I want to. The way that Tailwind works, if you want to create a custom style, you could do that using this document. Let's go ahead and save this. I'm not using Bootstrap anymore, so I'm going to go into this CodeSwing.json file, and I'll just get rid of this right here. Now we'll also need to turn on JIT mode because it's not on by default. So we'll do that in the Tailwind config file. We'll say mode JIT, and then we're going to need to specify which file we want the processor to look at for any styles. And this purge is going to have the list of files that we want to check. So here I will just say index.html. You can also use wildcards and patterns here if you want to. Let's go ahead and save that. All right, a couple more things to set this up in the dev container. So I need to add a couple of things here. I need to say post create command, and I want to run an npm install command whenever the code space is created. And then I'm going to say post start command and run an npm start command. Now we can see if this is working by issuing an npm start command. Now this will process whatever is here in the source.css file, and it'll output it to style.css. So you should see something like this. So it's 639 lines right now, but this is actually a lot shorter than if I were to take out. So if you wanted to see how big this was without the JIT compiler, you can take it out of JIT mode, and then it would actually probably need to get rid of both of these, and then it would just generate the actual gargantuan file. So if I take these out, canceling this, so I did Control-C, and we'll run the npm start command. And you can see that now, if I scroll all the way, it is a lot bigger. So this is, what is this thing? 186,000 lines. So you're getting a really good deal with just 600 lines of code here. And make sure that we are processing it back into a style.css. And look, it's already 639. And we'll need to make some changes. And we need to make some changes into this index.html because this is clearly Bootstrap code here. It's sort of similar, but not the same. So I'm just going to say text center here, and I will do something simple here. So I'll say for the headline, this is going to be text. And this is one of the cool things about Tailwind, that you can actually, instead of creating or using any of the default styles, you can actually, in brackets, put any number that you want right here. So this is going to generate some text that is 50 pixels in size, EX6, and then we'll use font extra bold, and we'll use a font color, text red 500, tracking tight for the headline, and for the paragraph, we'll just use some other classes here just to make it look nice. We'll do margin top 4. We'll issue a max width of 2XL, padding, a little bit of padding horizontally of 6 units, and we'll create a text size here of text XL and give it a gray color for the text, and go ahead and center it with MX Auto. So the thing about Tailwind is that you end up writing a lot more classes, but everything is closer to the way that the browser expects it. So if we take a look at the style.css, you'll see that it's probably a little bit bigger. It's all the way to 675 now, and it's created some of those classes that we're currently using. Let's go ahead and see if we can open up the CodeSwing. We'll say change layout. Let's see, we'll try split bottom. And there it is. Looks like I've got a little bit of a problem here. Also, I don't really need this JavaScript anymore, so I'll get rid of it. And as I'm doing this, I really just need this type of layout here. All right, we'll fix this up by modifying this so that the container is at the top, and we don't need some of the sizes down here on the paragraph. And we'll put the MX auto on the main container, and that way it will center things according to the width of the element. Finally, because I want to use this in other places, I'm going to make sure that I'll do a git status here to check out the files that I've changed. It's like I may want to add node modules into my git ignore. And let's go ahead and clear this out. And we'll add these, commit them. And we'll go ahead and push these to the repo. And now we should have a nice Tailwind template. You don't have to make this one yourself. You can just use the one that I've created for you. And now we can play around with the just-in-time mode in Tailwind CSS. All right, just one more thing. Just like with the other template, I'm going to go into settings, make sure that this is a template repository. And now whenever I want to start a TailSwing project, I can just use this template.
All right. So you can see that just the ability to create an environment that allows you to do like an npm start, run any of your own modules. That's kind of what's pretty cool. And it really works well with the JIT mode, because the JIT mode allows you to rewrite the CSS file. With CodeSwing, you can kind of create a playground to play around with anything. And you saw that, for example, it has the React library available, Vue.js. It even has like a template for Svelte, and you can create your own templates if you want to, and then go ahead and create yourself your copy of the repo. And again, I have the TailSwing repo. You can see it right here. So you just go to github.com/planet of the web and take a look at either the BootSwing. So this is actually generated from BootSwing, and this one's called TailSwing. So keep on making copies of these and making your own templates. I'd love to see maybe some environments that you guys have created. So I really love what this is going to do for me. As I mentioned, I think I'm going to be doing a lot more courses that just use this sort of structure. Instead of right now, I use CodePen a lot, and nothing wrong with CodePen. I love it. It's really easy to set up, but I want to sort of give you, things that I can do beyond CodePen and perhaps explore some of the other things. Who knows, maybe I'll do like a, codeathon with Morton, or just do something where I can show you that you can pair code and work on some code at the same time as somebody else, or do like a code review. Super cool stuff. So this is sort of a special episode of the Toolbox. Let's check to see if we have any sort of comments. I did want to say that I apologize about the stream quality. I'm not exactly sure where the problem is, because I'm looking at it on LinkedIn, and it looks like it's a little bit low res. I don't know if it's just LinkedIn. I don't know if the YouTube version looks a lot better, but I'm getting some RJ45 cable here, hopefully by next week, and I'm getting a new M1 Max, so hopefully we'll eliminate kind of a couple of those throughput issues. Perhaps I'll try some additional software, or like Ecamm Live is pretty awesome for live streaming. So let's see, any other comments? It looks like the pipe from the US to the EU is overloaded all day pretty much. So yeah, I know what you mean. I'm in Florida, and there's usually, I see the wind is moving, which isn't normal outside my window. So there's usually like a lot of thunderstorms, and it's kind of iffy, especially like in the afternoon. That's when they usually happen. So I kind of have to live with whatever I get, but hopefully maybe like a wired internet will solve some of the problems. Because I know, a lot of times if there's a lot of people, using the Wi-Fi, it can get pretty busy. So I don't see any other comments. And the only other thing that I have is the Toolbox shorts. As I mentioned, this is kind of a special version of the Toolbox. So we're not using the usual stuff. We're not doing things in the usual order. So today I have just a bunch of Tailwind sort of related shorts. So the first one that I found was this really cool site called Hypercolor. So this, I am, if anybody knows me, I'm a little bit color challenged. I feel like it takes me a long time to find colors that I like. So this essentially gives you a bunch of gradients. And the nice thing is that the interface allows you just to copy. This is Tailwind code. So, but you can, if you want to just do CSS, I'm not even sure what, if you do JPEG, what it would do, but I guess you would get maybe a copy of this gradient. But you can copy the code for either version right here. And you can also sort of customize the gradient and get the new code right here. So I love, I think with a lot of these sites, what I really love to see is like the interface, because a lot of them are pretty clever. There's a lot of gradients in here, not too many, but I think that it's a good stepping stone here for maybe making your own. And with the JIT sort of version of, the JIT structure of how you create things, it should be even easier to create some of these gradients, because then all we would have to do is switch these out to like brackets, and you would just put whatever color you want in there. But honestly, I'd probably begin with some of these because they're pretty neat. Also, let's check out some of the other frameworks. So one of the things that people don't like about Tailwind is that it doesn't have any components. This is one of the advantages of something like Bootstrap. It comes with a ton of pre-built components. So you get like the carousel, which is pretty popular. You get tooltips, you get, pop-ups. Well, something like Tailwind doesn't come with any of those. And so it's nice that people have sort of built a couple of different sort of things around Tailwind. So this is a component library for Tailwinds. So you can sort of have all the pieces that are missing and that are in something like Bootstrap by using some of these libraries. So you can use them. You can see that there's like alerts, drop-downs, popovers. There's a lot of stuff in here, and it's pretty easy to add. Like all you're doing here is adding a link to your project, and it gives you all of these different components, which I think you can see also that there is support for React Vue and Angular. I don't know what the deal is with Svelte. Check this one out. I think it's pretty good. I mean, once you start loving Tailwind, you're going to want to find some of these component libraries to just make things a little bit easier. All right, another one is this one called DaisyUI, Tailwind CSS Components. Again, just another component library. Looks a lot different. And you can, let's see the component here. I'm really impressed by the demos that these things have and the example codes that you can see. So actually, you can change the theme of this. So this is pretty cool. You can take a look at their own different themes, I guess, for the library. So there's like a dark mode here, and you can go through and install this and use this component library. Just another one that you can use. There's quite a few of them, and I almost get the feeling that eventually Tailwind will have its own sort of official library, but they haven't done it yet. So people are filling the gap here. All right, so there is another one here called a Tailkit, Components and Templates for Tailwind. Just another sort of look. As I mentioned, there's just, this one has a GitHub repo, 250 free components and templates. So you can just go here and actually, this one I think installs as a plugin. So you can, it's a little bit more tightly integrated into the framework. So you can go to any of these sort of components. And this one's got a nice interface too. I like that. Here you can just click on code and just copy the code directly. And it's just giving you the code for the specific component. So you don't necessarily have to install another library. You just sort of grab the code for the thing that you need. A lot of times I feel like when you're building something it's a little bit difficult to sort of figure out all the classes that you're going to need. So I love these libraries that just give you quickly all the code that you're going to need, and then you can go in and customize it as well. In the same way, this other one called Tailbox does the same thing. It just shows you the code for different sort of components. So you can just hit view code right here. And a lot of times, honestly, I start layouts by just grabbing the code, because you can see that, if I were to sort of have to type all this code, it would just be crazy. So a lot of times you can just jump in the thing that you need, whether it's a form, some content, some cards, and then just copy some code, get started, and then jump into and customize it for your application. So there's a couple of, or I think that was actually it for for the shorts. So hopefully, after the show, I will have a post on my website that has all the links. So if you didn't grab something, or if you need some of the URLs for these things, I'll make sure that I put them all in the article and you can just read them. So don't worry about that right now. Let's see. Yeah, if you want to know what I'm up to, you can go, of course, to rabo.org. So I'll have it right here is where I'll put the links to all these tools with the URLs and everything. A couple of things that just this morning as I was getting ready for the show, I realized that I have a new course that just released. This one's called Learning Git and GitHub. I had another version of this. This is kind of a remake of an old course, and it was a lot of fun to get to redo something that honestly is pretty ancient. And when I originally did that course, I didn't actually do it for people to actually learn Git and GitHub from. It was just really, I was doing a lot. If you look at a lot of my courses, we have like GitHub repos for all the, most of my courses now come with a GitHub repo. And I just needed something so that I didn't have to explain Git and GitHub every time for every course. But it turns out that this course has became like hugely popular. I think the fact that it was relatively simple just help people really enjoy it. So I had an opportunity to redo it. And what I did is I just sort of gave you an opportunity to think about Git and GitHub as if you had a multiverse time machine, and the whole sort of course is designed around that concept. Thankfully, Marvel came out with a lot of movies that backed up my concept here. And so what I did is also go through a lot more features and just pretty much made it something very practical to how I use GitHub. That's the difference between this and what the previous version. All right, let's see. This is just me doing the demo. Let's see. This is just my planet of the web. So I think that's all I have for you. I did make the version of Tailwind free. So if you follow me, you should have a link to my Tailwind course so that you can access it for free for 24 hours. That's also, it actually has the slightly older version of the course. I just added a new, just actually submitted a new version of the course that has this JIT compiler in it. So I wanted to shoot this video to kind of give you the opportunity of understanding how to set it up. The same things that I did on CodeSpaces, you can do with just your regular Visual Studio Code. So the same way you set it up for CodeSpaces, you can just set it up that way and play around with it. Almost the entire old version of the course still works. It's just this JIT compiler stuff that is pretty new. And there have been some additions since I recorded the course, which was for like version 2.0 and 2.1. So that is it. Let's see. I don't see a lot of stuff on the comments, so maybe I will have a little bit more time this week, or a little less time with you guys this week, unless somebody puts in some sort of comment. Next week, I'm planning on doing something on the new features in Bootstrap 5.1. 5.1 was kind of a, 5.0 was kind of the big update where they just eliminated jQuery, but they really didn't add that many new components. 5.1 has a couple of super cool components that I think you'll enjoy. And so I'm going to do just a version of this where I just show you the new components that I'm super excited about, and perhaps something about the things that you should watch out for if you have to update a site. I would not want to be the person that that would have to update like an existing Bootstrap 5 site. It would be just a lot of work. So having said that, next week, it's I'm trying to make the shows every Wednesday at the same time. So every Wednesday, wherever you're at this time, which happens to be in the US at 10 a.m. Pacific time and 1 p.m. Eastern where I live. So make sure that you follow me for more details. I write a newsletter that comes out every Thursday or so. Sometimes I go a little late. and it also has a lot more resources that what you see here. You can find out all the old versions or the old copies of the old shows on rabo.org. So follow me there and make sure you visit the site for any show notes and links and all the detailed notes of everything we have done today. So there's actually a question that's great. So let's see, what are the difference and some similarities between Bootstrap, Tailwind, and Chakra? I haven't used Chakra UI, but I did a course on both Bootstrap and Tailwind, so I can certainly speak to a lot of that. I think Bootstrap is, Tailwind feels like what Bootstrap had become, but just sort of like on a next level version. I mentioned a while back they had made Bootstrap, or they had announced that Bootstrap was going to be using Tailwind CSS. I mean, not Tailwind CSS, that Bootstrap was going to be using Post CSS, which is now what Tailwind uses. And it's able to do a lot of really cool things with it. I think like if you're not using components, a lot of the classes are pretty similar. You do have to learn them. Tailwind is a lot huger. So if you were to just use the library without JIT, you saw that it was like 180,000 lines of CSS. You would not want to put that in production. In the old version of Tailwind, you could use Purge CSS, which is actually a tool that will look at your CSS and it'll extract things that you're not using. So they're just using that library to take care of things. So because of that, though, you end up with a lot less code that analyzes what you're using. So I do feel that it's a little bit better, especially if you're using any sort of component library. So if you're using React or Vue or Svelte, any one of those, then definitely go for Tailwind CSS. If you just want to put website and you need some of those built-in components like the carousel or tooltips or popovers or any of the other components that Bootstrap comes with, then definitely stick with that. It's a lot easier. Tailwind gets to be a pain whenever you have like a big page that is not component based. So say that you had a page with some products and maybe there's like 20 buttons, 20 of the exact same buttons that said like more info. If you wanted to change the color of one of those buttons, you would have to go into all the 20 different segments, different sort of pieces of code and update the code that way. So you don't want to use it for something that is not component based. But it really shines with something like React or something like Vue.js. It is really just a joy to use because you just point it at all your code and it generates CSS, especially now when you use something like React or Vue, it's going to put the CSS with each component. So that's even better because if the component doesn't exist on the page, you don't even get to see the CSS on the page. Like it doesn't even load that CSS. So it's even better when you use a component-based library. That's the main difference between the two. I still love Bootstrap. I'm not getting rid of it, but I now, if I ever have to do anything with some of the sort of newer front-end frameworks, I will not use Bootstrap at all because it is not made for that. Hopefully the new version, who knows what will happen next. I feel that Tailwind is also like in a very fast release scheduled. I just did that course not long ago, maybe, 4 months, maybe 6 months at the most. I did version 2.0. As I was doing that course, I actually, the release actually dropped. So I had to take a little longer, do that course, and then I was able to do version 2.0 of that course. And in the few months that has released, they've already updated twice. And they said that they're going to release another major version, 3.0, hopefully by the end of the year. So they are definitely at a much faster clip than Bootstrap is. I remember the version 4 for Bootstrap just took forever. Version 5 also. I mean, it's great and I love it, but I feel like right now Tailwind has the edge with this just-in-time mode. It just kills everything else. I would love to find out more about Chakra UI, so I'm going to have to check it out. You're really going to love Tailwind. So I don't see any more questions, and we're at like 44 minutes. So thank you so much for attending. Hopefully I'll get to see you again next week. So excited to like do something where I can actually talk to human beings. So we'll see you again next week in the next episode of the Toolbox. And here's my end credits.